I hopped into my time machine, thought I'd fix a little glitch, but now I'm stuck in medieval France. Man, life's a real stitch. I'm Booster Gold, hero untold, but today is getting pretty old. My mentor's got a starfish face. That's something.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. We are back to discuss some more Booster Gold. We said we're sticking with it, and we're sticking with it. I don't think I don't know if I can title this Volume 3, because what we're doing is not Volume 3, right, Evan? You said 2.5 is what you call this?
I'm just guessing because it's all in the Omnibus edition. They just put out a new collection of Booster Gold, and all the ones we've talked about before are in the same volume, these two issues we're doing. But in the original trade, 11 and 12, and then 15 to 18 were volume 3, and they just skipped over 13 and 14.
Interesting.
Which were basically fill-in issues, and 11 and 12 were kind of fill-in issues, but they led into something else.
The first story that we're going to get into was written by Chuck Dixon, and the second one is written by Rick Remender. And then did we figure out where 15 picks up? Who's writing it at that point?
I believe at that point, 15, Dan Jurgens is writing and drawing it, and Dan Jurgens drew the issues with Chuck Dixon, so I'm assuming they collaborated on it, and it picks up from the end of 11 and 12.
Okay. All right.
13 and 14, I do understand now the reason why certain characters appear in there. This was post Jeff Johns writing the series, and then Dan Jurgens drew at least part of the first two volumes. I can't remember if he drew it all. The original creator of Booster Gold, he stayed on as artist for 11 and 12, and then took over writing and art duties starting with issue 15. I'm assuming he was involved in some of the plotting with Dixon. He kind of picks that up, but 10 was the last issue with Jeff Johns writing it.
Okay. To catch everybody up, if this is your first podcast, we're in the middle of Booster Gold. Prior to this, we had our Volume 1 discussion where we talked about how Booster went back and saved his best friend, Blue Beetle. Volume 2 hit, and at the beginning of that volume, if I remember correctly, Blue Beetle decides to, or at least we assume that he goes back to set the timeline straight. Seems to accept his fate.
They rescued Blue Beetle at the end of Volume 1, and then it was assumed that he and Booster would be time cops together. But even though Ted was saved in such a way that it maintained the timeline, turns out it didn't, and it let Maxwell Lord take over the world.
We had the OMAC invasion.
There's a group called the Time Stealers. The supposedly magnanimous Blue Beetle from the 20-something century was actually a villain who was Jaime Reyes's nemesis, and ended up trying to eliminate him by altering the timeline. Eventually, things got so messed up that Blue Beetle said, I'm just going to go back and restore the timeline and save everybody. And so he sacrificed himself again. Booster is completely disillusioned with time travel because he couldn't save his best friend. Then he's confronted by Batman, who found pictures of him crying over and over to save Barbara Gordon in The Killing Joke, which is something that happened in Volume 1 when Rip was trying to teach him that some things can't be changed. Batman says, hey, I know you can't tell me everything that's going on, but keep doing what you're doing, and I may be no Ted Kord, but if you need help, you can talk to me.
That's right.
So that kind of put Booster back on track, and then he returned to Rip Hunter's time lab to find that Rip had saved his sister, Michelle, a.k.a. Gold Star, and he figured since Michelle was from the future and she died in an explosion, it didn't create any loose ends for him to save her right before she died.
Right.
And so that's where we are now, that Booster's going to work on fixing anomalies in the time stream caused by the various crises, and he's got his sister helping him. Oh, and it was also revealed to us, not to Booster, that Rip Hunter is in fact Booster's son.
Son, correct.
Which is a secret that he keeps because when you're messing with time travelers, you don't want to let them know when you were born so they can't alter your personal history.
Yes.
Or kill you in the crib.
Exactly.
Booster Gold, number 11 and 12. I did not get the release date, but I know it was in 2008. Vicious Cycle, parts 1 and 2, written by Chuck Dixon, a longtime DC writer, especially associated with Batman. Pencil art by Dan Jurgens. Finished art by Norm Ratman. Colors by Hi-Fi. letters in issue 11 by Nick J. Napolitano and issue 12 by Sal Cipriano, and killer covers by Dan Jurgens and Norm Rapman. Especially this first one, you got Booster looking tougher than Booster Gold's ever looked, with Batman and Robin, old school pantsless Dick Grayson Robin, reflected in his gauntlets. You almost believe Booster Gold can take on Batman and Robin.
Yes, almost.
Yeah. We open on Killer Moth and his more drearily attired henchmen robbing the Gotham Museum of Antiquities.
All right.
They're interrupted by What was that?
Hold on. I'm interrupting you because I just need to know, ever have any experience reading anything about Killer Moth before?
He was a villain who showed up every once in a while on Teen Titans Go that I watch with my kids. I know he exists. I have a HeroClix figure of him, but he looked like he was inspired in costume design alone by the Golden Age Green Lantern, because none of the colors seem to match.
Green helmet, purple suit, brown gloves and brown pants.
Green and brown striped leggings, and the green on the pants doesn't quite match the green on the helmet, maybe? I don't know. Maybe this is the heartwarming story of a man who rose to be a mediocre Gotham criminal despite his color blindness.
Good point.
Killer Moth is a character who I know exists because he's so weird, or at least he looks so weird, but that's about all I know about him. On Teen Titans Go, he's more involved with mutating bugs and things like that. This one, he seems to be more of a thief with a cool suit in terms of abilities. Again, aesthetically, I'm not sure what was going on here.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even get into what his helmet does or anything like that. Although it looks cool, I feel like it has to serve some kind of a purpose. But other than just to cover his face, that's kind of all we get. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting villain. I didn't even know really much about. So I think this is the first time I've ever read anything with him in it. Sorry I interrupted you. You can go ahead and continue your synopsis.
You're good. They're robbing the Gotham Museum of Antiquities. They're interrupted by Batman and Robin when a guy with a bow tie tries to get away with the few artifacts he stopped by Batgirl. He removes a device from his pocket, but before he can use it, Batgirl crushes it under her boot. Man says it wouldn't have hurt her, but now she's changed the world. As Batgirl and the dynamic duo disappear, the man surrenders to the police, including Detective Sergeant Gordon, who's sporting an eye patch. Time has been altered.
Something's happened.
Booster Gold, meanwhile, is still adjusting to the idea of his sister being alive when Rip Hunter tells him there's a temporal anomaly that needs their urgent attention. Booster is confused since they can travel through time and even outside of time, but nevertheless, they take the time sphere to Gotham City, which is overrun by monstrous villains. In the past, Killer Moth is hired by the mystery man from the opening scene to rob the museum. He gives him an elaborate set of plans with a step-by-step guide for pulling off the job, then disappears. Moth is KO'd by Booster, who takes his place in making sure the robbery goes off without a hitch so that history is not altered. That means taking down Batman and Robin fast, which he does, and Skeet stuns Batgirl. The henchmen want to finish the heroes off, but the disguised Booster says that's not his style, explaining the killer in Killer Moth is more of a metaphor. Booster and the henchmen turn the goods over to the mystery man, who vanishes in a flash, allowing Booster to deduce he's a time traveler.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the time sphere, Rip explains the time traveler is Wiley Dalbert, a physicist from the 27th century who invented a time travel device that could only go backward. He stole along the way, amassing wealth before settling in Gotham in the 1870s and becoming a philanthropist. One of his projects was to establish a children's hospital. But when his device was destroyed by Batgirl, that ended his journey early, or possibly late. The children's hospital didn't get founded until Dr. Thomas Wayne came along and did it. And wouldn't you know it, the opening ceremony fell on the night the Waynes were supposed to go see a movie and take a fateful shortcut down an alley. So now we have no Batman, no Robin, no Batgirl, and Commissioner Gordon's missing an eye.
It's getting bad.
Rip, Booster, and Goldstar return to Gotham, where a signal lights up the sky, but it's a Moth signal, activated by the Penguin to save some crooks from a shootout with the police. It seems Booster's quick takedown of the Dark Knight and Boy Wonder gave Killer Moth a monumental amount of street cred, enough to make him the equivalent of Batman for the Gotham underworld.
Street cred.
So Rip sends Booster back in time again to the night of the museum robbery, but wants him to fix it this time as Batman. Booster's totally in favor of that idea. Unfortunately, when they arrive at the Batcave, Alfred is waiting, hitting Rip with a shotgun blast that sends him careening back into the time sphere, which, as a failsafe, whisks Rip to safety and leaves the siblings on the wrong end of Alfred's weapon.
Yep.
Skeets saves the day, stunning Alfred and allowing Booster and his sister to escape in a retro, for that time contemporary, Batmobile. But they didn't make it out with the costume, so they go for Plan B, having Michelle stand in for Batgirl. Booster obviously knows where Batgirl lives after his repeated failed attempts to take down the Joker. Barbara Gordon walks into a room before Booster and Michelle can leave, so they knock her out with gas from her own utility belt and escape while her dad opens fire. Concerned that Booster's past self seeing him at the robbery will cause more problems, Michelle takes her brother to a costume shop and outfits him as Elvis. Police spot the Batmobile and try to arrest them, but they escape with the help of a quick smoke screen, courtesy of Skeets. At the museum, Booster as Elvis KOs Booster as Killer Moth, and they get the loot to Dalbert, except for one jewel-encrusted dagger that seems like it might be important. Booster and Michelle escape. Batman gets the Batmobile back, but doesn't seem curious about who stole it, and a shadowy figure watches the investigation at the museum. It's revealed to be the Elongated Man, and it turns out he was looking for the dagger, too. The cover to Booster Gold number 15 features Booster taking on his old pal, the Elongated Man.
That's right. Yes. You said old pals. These guys have had run-ins with each other before.
Oh, they were teammates on the Justice League back in the Wahaha days.
Okay. So this is the...
And Elongated Man, you might remember, this is coming on the heels of 52, which is where Elongated Man was killed off after having all the humor crushed out of him in Identity Crisis, which is a fantastic story, but not a very fun one.
That's the one, Sue Dibney, right?
Sue was murdered, and the heroes have been manipulating people's minds. It's been a while since I read 52. Ralph was going down a dark path, trying to see if there was a way to bring Sue back. He ended up sacrificing his life, and at the end, if I'm not mistaken, they were reunited as Ralph and Sue Dibney, ghost detectives.
Oh, that rings a bell.
So, but we're coming off of, Blue Beetle died in the run-up to Infinite Crisis, which included Identity Crisis. In 52, the follow-up to Infinite Crisis, Elongated Man was killed off. That's fresh in people's minds. People were wondering what DC had against all the characters from that era of Justice League.
Right. All right. Well, okay, so yeah, issues 11 and 12, they're Vicious Cycle. And what an apt name for this story. I love time travel stories. I was on board and trying to figure everything out. It almost lost me a couple times, but I was able to at least somewhat. I'll tell you the most confusing part is when, and really it doesn't impact the story any, is I think really it was just a bit that they put in there to kind of show how confusing time travel is. In the future, you see Rip and Michelle grabbing the punched out Booster and putting him back in the time sphere. Michelle, who is Batgirl at the time, is like, is that our future? Or is that, of course, you have no idea if that ever happens. It's not like they come back to that either, which is funny.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that they have to go get him. This is a fun story. We have Killer Moth. We have alternate histories. We got a lot of fun little bits there where Alfred with the shotgun cracked me up. Him just showing up with a shotgun, trying to lock down the Batcave when Booster and Michelle are in there is pretty funny. What do you think of the Mothmobile?
Like I said, I didn't know a lot about Killer Moth, but he seems to, even before he gets his hyper level street cred, he seemed to have a lot of branded equipment a la Batman.
Yeah, very much anti-Batman. I mean, it's almost a villainous reflection where he's got a lot of money, a lot of suits. He's got a moth cave, Mothmobile, a moth copter. All that's pretty funny. So our time traveler here, I assume the disc is his way of time traveling. So when Batgirl originally, I thought it was like some kind of thing that he stole from the museum and was going to use. But he's just using the gang to gather stuff so he can, I guess, fence it in the past, maybe.
Yeah, he uses them to steal stuff, and then he makes the money. And I guess since he's going back with, if you want me to explain inflation and things like that, I will, but probably not. So, if you steal money in the present and take it all back to the past, that's, it's even more money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I assume that's what's going on there. I'm trying to find out. I looked up at one point. I don't know if he ever shows up again. He seems like one of those characters who could totally be a one-off, or maybe, his first appearance was actually in Detective Comics number 714 in 1997.
Oh, wow.
Also written by Chuck Dixon. Yes, that was one of his 4 appearances. So
okay.
2 issues of Detective Comics in the 90s and 2 issues of Booster Gold. Now, I, for one, love when writers pick up. I like it when they tie threads together anyway, but I especially like it when the same writer picks up a thread from something they did before or didn't get to finish and brings it forward in another issue. There was a Marvel series called Skull the Slayer that I think lasted 7 issues, and they apparently didn't get to finish their story. So there's an issue of Marvel 2-in-1 that wraps up that story.
Oh, nice. Nice.
And Iron Fist, there were some dangling plot threads that they brought over into Marvel Team Up, but eventually put into Power Man. Power Man and Iron Fist lasted longer than Power Man or Iron Fist alone. Wiley Dalbert did appear in 2 issues of Detective Comics, also written by Chuck Dixon.
Nice. That's real nice. I could imagine they probably, well, with this, he's kind of important to the time stream, so I guess you really don't want to mess with him too much because he has to happen in order for other things to happen, which is, okay, we'll bring him in for a couple, but this guy has to do what he's got to do or things are not going to be right, as we can see in the story.
Cool to check out those stories sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I love the fact that the original plan is Booster to head back as Batman, which would have been interesting. But of course, that doesn't pan out. I love the fact that Michelle calls Booster a time cop, which, that's pretty much what he is. He's going around trying to fix these things and make sure that everything goes off without a hitch.
He's trying to put right what once went wrong.
Oh, my goodness. If we can't make any more Quantum Leap references.
We rescheduled this. I've gone back and reread it. It's hard to keep up with some of the time travel logic. I especially had to go back for the synopsis because I wasn't quite sure what altered the time stream at first, but I nailed that down. It's a little confusing how when Batgirl broke that machine, it stopped him from going back in time, prevented Batman from happening, but when Booster goes back in time, Batman and Robin are still there to try to stop the robbery. They make references at several points about solidifying time and things like that, and I'm not sure if they've got the time travel stuff nailed down and I'm just not following it, which is entirely possible, or if at the end of the day, Chuck Dixon's like, look, this is going to be a fun story. And if something doesn't make sense, we're going to say time travel.
I feel like it's the latter. I'm
okay with that. It's not as far out as, I don't know if you've seen the Flash movie, but basically they're like, well, time travel and then Michael Keaton happened. And that doesn't make sense to me. They go far enough that I'm like, okay, I'll buy it. I'll trust you guys. Time travel. So it altered history, but it hasn't solidified, so they can still go back to the original timeline. Rip knows how to do this stuff. I'm okay with it. Every time I got confused, then you have Booster Gold punching himself dressed as Killer Moth while he's dressed as Elvis. And I'm like, look, if I have to choose between seeing this happen or having everything make 100% sense, I'm going to say, give me this story.
Yeah, yeah.
So it does call back to some of the 70s Brave and the Bold. I've talked to you about being on some of those shows on The Brave and the Bob with the Bob Haney stories, and they're just absolutely nuts and they're fun. With those, I'm like, okay, if it comes to logic or this insanity, I'll take the insanity.
Right.
So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, even there's a part where where the scene you were talking about where we see Rip and Gold Star dragging the unconscious Booster in the Killer Moth suit back onto the time sphere, and they're trying to figure out what order it happens in. And she's like, well, why don't I remember this? And he goes, oh, it'll happen later. I can feel it because my jaw hurts. I didn't realize I punched myself that hard. And she goes, but will I remember that I didn't remember it? And he's like, yeah, it's just best not to think about it. I feel like that was kind of a nod to the readers. It's like, if it gets too confusing, just say time travel and move on. And there's nothing in it that I went, wait a minute, that makes no sense. I was too busy laughing.
One of the things that I took out of here is we got to establish our brother-sister relationship. It just seems like Booster's glad to have her back. She's glad to be there, and she's playing catch-up. He's the big brother. Is she the big sister?
They're twins.
They're twins.
But I mean, he's definitely more experienced, but I think, she's kind of deferring to him for that reason. He's probably a more experienced superhero too. I'd never read anything with her before this, so I don't know anything about her past. It shows a couple times that she's capable. She's just letting him lead the way because he has a vague idea of what he's doing.
Yeah. He knows what's going on, at least a little bit. And when he doesn't, he does a good job of saying, just forget about it. Don't ask. And then she's like, all right, I'm along for the ride. So it's cool. We've got this duo. They're looking forward to spending time together. I'm pretty sure it's in the next story, and it might have been in a previous story as well, where they're wanting to go hit some important moments in history and watch them together, which is pretty cool.
That's in 13.
So that's kind of one of the big things that I pull out of here is these two are a duo. Booster's not alone. He's got his sister with him now. And even though it's not Ted Cord, it's Michelle Goldstar hanging out with him. Just a fun time travel misadventure. It was fun to watch some unique characters interact and some unique villains for sure. I'm a fan of alternate histories and seeing what happened, even though we don't get a whole lot of that. We just know that things have turned bad and these guys need to fix it. And the time travel gets wonky. Booster is in the same spot at the same time. He hits himself. It's good stuff. I dig it.
The other thing I noticed in issue 12, and I'm betting this is my lack of DC history, but did you notice there were a couple times where Gordon seemed really upset, especially when they said Batgirl, when Michelle was in the suit, did certain things, and they said, maybe that's not the real Batgirl, and Gordon's like, yes, it is. It has to be. I'm guessing that was... maybe he suspected Barbara was Batgirl. Chuck Dixon was writing Batman stories before I was born, and that was a long time ago that I was born. If anybody's going to play with Batman history, Chuck Dixon's a qualified person to do it. I wondered if Gordon maybe thought she was Batgirl but hadn't been able to prove it. And was relieved to see her and Batgirl in the same place at the same time. That was kind of interesting. Of course, maybe that's something that'll get picked up in the next few issues.
It could be, yeah. Could be. We have a costume designer, maybe, I guess, who now has his hands on some, is it 25th century fabric? Because he makes a trade.
He offered them a trade for it, but he took the cash instead.
Oh, all right. Cash is good.
Booster has learned a few things from Rip.
Good. It seems like he's taken these lessons to heart. At least he's definitely serious in his job, so that's a good thing. They get to kind of pal around and drive the classic Batmobile, which was awesome to see. So I like that. Any other notes you got for your story?
No, I think that takes care of it for me.
All right, good deal.
Other than I'm sorry I misled you about this being a self-contained story. And I feel like in the previous episodes, I really oversold the whole Killer Moth as criminal Batman, which lasts maybe 3 pages.
I was going to say, it does not. Yeah. You get the feeling that it's just like you said, Penguin puts up the moth signal and the Killer Moth shows up. And yeah,
he wants 20% of the take on the job he's helping him finish.
And he shows up and non-lethally takes out some policemen, which is pretty cool with his big moth thing. And he just wraps them up in some silk.
Remember when one of his henchmen wanted to finish off Batman and Robin and Booster told him not to? Maybe that was part of the legend of Killer Moth.
He's now, that's his calling card.
I don't think this was ever revisited. I mean, I'm kind of curious. As much as I say, like, okay, the multiverse thing, alternate versions is overdone, I would totally read 5 or 6 issues of Killer Moth, patron saint of the Gotham underworld.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into Booster Gold 13 and 14, Stars in Your Eyes. This is written by Rick Remender, pencils by Pat Olaf, inks by Jerry Ordway, colors by Hi-Fi, letters by Sal Cipriano, assistant editor Harvey Richards. In the heart of a swirling cosmic storm, Booster Gold, the time-traveling hero from the 25th century, finds himself facing an unimaginable threat, the mind-controlling terror of Starro, the Conqueror. But this isn't just any battle. Starro has latched onto the one person Booster trusts most, his mentor, Rip Hunter. The issue kicks off with a relentless struggle as Booster grapples with the terrifying reality that the very man who taught him the ropes of time travel is now a puppet of an alien overlord. The stakes couldn't be higher. Starro has already begun spreading his spores across time to dominate the past, present, and future. In a desperate bid to undo the damage, Booster and his sister Michelle hurtle through the corridors of time, landing in the plague-ridden streets of 14th century Avignon, France. Here they discover Starro's insidious influence as the alien masquerades as a divine savior, preying on the fear and despair of the people. The once bright and cocky hero is forced to confront a dark and twisted version of reality where history itself is being rewritten under Starro's control. The tension mounts as Booster battles a Starro-possessed Rip Hunter, his punches not only against an alien foe, but against the tide of time itself. As the issue reaches its fever pitch, Booster finds himself trapped both physically and morally. The weight of altering history, the risk of losing his mentor, and the looming threat to his future son gnaw at his resolve. You say something about a son? I don't have a son. In a heart-stopping moment, Booster faces the chilling possibility of becoming one with Starro. His will crushed, his mission doomed. The issue closes on a cliffhanger, leaving readers on the edge of their seats as Booster is thrown into a pit of Starro spores, ready to assimilate the hero. Now, Booster Gold 14 throws readers right into the thick of the chaos as the future teeters on the brink of destruction. Booster Gold, time-traveling hero extraordinaire, is battling Starro's overwhelming invasion, a future in which the mind-controlling alien starfish has subjugated the entire world. The star spawn have infected even Earth's mightiest heroes, turning them into Starro's mindless pawns. Amid the bleak, apocalyptic future, Booster finds himself in a race against time to save the timeline and prevent the domination of all humanity. Booster's quest takes him on a dangerous jaunt through time, looking for one weapon capable of stopping Starro, an ice gun. With Rip Hunter as ally and fellow Time Master already compromised by Starro's spores, Booster must journey into the past to retrieve the legendary Mr. Freeze's gun, an essential tool to stop the spores and free Rip. With Skeets, his loyal robotic companion at his side, Booster leaps through the time stream, zipping into the dark and frigid streets of Gotham, right in the middle of a battle between Mr. Freeze and Batman. Only Booster could have the audacity to swoop in mid-fight, steal Freeze's signature weapon, and leave both the Dark Knight and Ice Villain wondering what just happened. Armed with the Freeze gun, Booster returns to the desolate future where the shadow of Starro looms large. As he frees Rip Hunter from Starro's grip, the battle heats up. Yet amidst the action, the enigmatic Jia is what I'm going to go with here, Jia, who has kind of aided Booster throughout, although she says he owes her one, reveals herself to be far more complicated than just a helpful ally. She secures Booster's promise for a favor owed, leaving behind a mysterious tension as she departs into the swirling chaos of time. Her true motives remain murky, hinting at the challenges facing Booster are far from over. As the issue draws to a close, Booster has successfully stalled Starro's plans, but it's clear that the victory is only temporary. The timeline appears to have been fixed, yet the future of Earth remains fragile. Rip reveals that Booster has given the Chronos twins their heart's desire and that they are back where they started, but no longer is time on their side. So there you go. That is issues 13 and 14. Stars in Your Eyes, parts 1 and 2. As I love Starro as a villain here. I don't know how many Starro time travel stories there's been told, but this is a good one. Well, take a look at Star Trek The Next Generation, the movie
First Contact.
Star Trek First Contact. You know, up there, as far as Star Trek movies go, of course, it's going to be near the top of my list because of time travel.
The one with the whales?
I'm afraid so. Although I've watched Star Trek quite a few times. Double dumbass on you.
Future Dollar Tree cinema entry right there.
Oh, is it? Good. I mean,
I've managed to get all the even numbered Star Trek movies from Dollar Tree.
Well, my understanding is it goes, every even Star Trek movie is a good one. So Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, Star Trek 6 was The Undiscovered Country. And you got to think about what's in between there, which is Why Does God Want a Starship? Star Trek 5. Star Trek 3 was The Search for Spock. Star Trek 1 is just too long and too visionary. You got Star Trek Generations was a somewhat of a time travel movie.
Yep.
First Contact was. All that's come around. Starro is very much an analog to the Borg. When they go back in time and they start assimilating everybody, there's always the argument that what Starro's done may be beneficial, may not be beneficial to the human race. But then again, there's arguments there that, well, you know, Starro has ended world hunger, ended poverty, ended war. But
the human race doesn't have a great track record, let's be honest.
That's pointed out here. It does not have a good record at all. Booster's got to try and help out Rip. When we open this issue, Gold Star is told there is a disaster happening and a big battle. Superman's involved and a bunch of people are dying left and right in this battle.
I can't figure out who he's fighting in there. From the two glimpses we get, it looks like he's fighting Harry Potter. Pretty sure that's not canon.
It's a guy.
Although they are both in the part of the Warner Brothers serververse.
Watch that on Max.
Yeah. So there's a big fight and there's a building falling over and the people who are about to be crushed.
And Booster
tells Michelle she's got to save one of them.
One person. And she obviously has an issue with that, or at least it bothers her.
Mm-hmm.
You have all this technology, you have all this power, and all we're going to do is save one person. He's like, yeah, unfortunately, that's what we have to do to maintain the timeline. She is the one that has to survive, which kind of makes you believe that normally Booster's not involved unless there is some kind of a time travel anomaly going on. My guess is some kind of time travel had to have happened to put her in that spot where she would have died.
Well, it says in his narration, the crises have left our timeline a chaotic mess. Our job is to nudge all altered events, big and small, back on their natural path.
Oh, you are going to be busy, sir. If that's the case, then if this is just something that happened where a butterfly flapped its wings or some kind of craziness happened. He mentions crises. Or crises. Yeah. You're going to be busy trying to fix that mess because I'm sure there's all sorts of little things that's gone off track because of it.
They're attempting to maintain a sort of sacred timeline, if you will.
Oh, that's infringement. So anyway, they get back to the lab and there's Rip standing in front of his chalkboard, conspiracy board, whatever you want to call it. I didn't notice it until now where it says Target Kronos up at the top of that board on the page. Rip turns around. He is, of course, a victim of Starro. He has a Starro spore on his face, and that's where our story starts. Starro wants to get back in time and take over humanity. One of the things that left out of my synopsis is exactly how this all gets started. This all gets started with Booster's ancestor, right?
Yeah.
Does he hop into a time sphere?
He uses the supernova suit and hops into a time sphere to get the future mother of his children to impress her by going back in time and finding a locket that she lost while she was working in Paris and Starro attacked the Earth.
So he's successful in finding the locket, but he also gets a Starro spore stuck on his leg, who apparently makes his way into Rip's lab. And, of course, that's where everything starts.
He did put it in a mayonnaise jar.
I love how Booster is so upset. A mayonnaise jar? Yeah. A mayonnaise jar? You put Starro in a mayonnaise jar. What were you thinking? It's a good time travel adventure. We got to get out there. We got to stop Starro. I love seeing how these villains use time travel to their advantage. It's so interesting to see him go back in time to the plague and be like, hey, guys, I've got just what you need right here to avoid the plague. You got some black spots? All right, here's all my sorrows. And starts putting them on people. And, of course, it takes over from there. So the Kronos twins. Did you know who these people were when you were reading this first? Did that look like Kronos? The Kronos I remember, what I remember is what I read recently in DC 90s history. Superman Time and Time Again. Look for it on the 90s upcoming Unspoken Issues podcast. During that time, which I don't know if you read, but at one point, essentially, Superman gets dislodged from time. The way he time travels, or the only way that he can figure out how to time travel, because he's covered in these chronoparticles or something. It's weird. It's DC. It's science fiction and all that. An explosion has to happen. So an explosion happens and he finds himself in the Jurassic period. This all comes back to, was not was, walking the dinosaur, that thing we had a discussion about a long time ago. So anyway, he runs into Kronos in the Jurassic period, and Kronos does not look like this.
Okay.
Kronos looks like a human dude. So there's either another version of Kronos out there, another Kronos villain prior to this guy, which is a very good possibility. He doesn't look like a superhero. He looks just like some schlub who has some kind of, he just looks like a schlub scientist almost. So I didn't know who this was. I assume this must be the typical Kronos look that you're used to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, there is a different Kronos called Walker Gabriel. I haven't read a lot of stuff with Kronos. This is the Kronos I have a HeroClix figure of. All
right. Well, as long as you recognize them. I had no clue until the very end of this story. I was like, who are these two people running around that are got Starros on their face and time things on their chest? Obviously, they have something to do with time, but I have no idea who they are.
Lady Kronos I hadn't seen before. I object to them referring to themselves as the Kronos twins, given that they're kind of romantically involved.
Well, there's a point where she tells him not to get jealous. Is there something else that happens?
Yeah, she kind of, hits on Booster, and he's like, well, hey, aren't you and Kronos? And she's like, well, we're not exclusive, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. That's right. Well, anyway, I object as well, sir.
Yeah, now go ahead. I hadn't seen her before, so I did a little quick research on her.
What'd you find out?
Well, she first appeared in the All New Adam series written by Gail Simone, but toward the end of that series, it was written by one Rick Remender.
Okay.
And drawn by Patrick Olive.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this team...
So they picked up a thread from something they were doing. So that was in the All New Adam, and that series ended with issue 25 in September of 2008. Booster Gold 13 came out in December of 2008. I'm a little spoiler alert. We don't know. I don't think we find out what the Kronos twins are planning, because Lady Kronos' last appearance is in Booster Gold number 14, and that's also the last work Rick Remender did for DC.
Oh, wow.
He had a run on All New Adam and then that Booster Gold fill-in issue. I mean, don't feel bad for him. He created Deadly Class for Image, and it got picked up by the Sci-Fi Channel. So, he's done a lot of stuff, just not at DC.
He's doing all right.
Yeah, that's where she came from. She seems to hint that she and Booster have or will have some kind of relationship. She knows who he is, and he has no idea who she is.
Gotcha.
But they do end up working together because he blasts her with the freeze gun, which is a lot nicer way to remove a Starro spore than what he does to Gorilla Grodd.
I was just getting ready to talk about that because I'm heading over to Mike's Amazing World of Comics right now to confirm this. Do you have any idea where I'm going with this?
I do not.
Okay. All right. The inks on this are by Jerry Ordway.
Mm-hmm.
And there is another book from the 90s where Jerry Ordway penciled a parasite getting ripped off of somebody's face. And that was Wildstar. And I knew when I saw this happen, I was like, wait a second. Ordway's involved in this in some way.
I bet I have those issues. I got one of his Wildstar series when one of the local comic shops was closed.
If you got any of Wildstar Sky Zero, which I think it happens in the first issue, it's just Wildstar's face and blood embossed on the cover. In that issue, he's fighting these people that are kind of like him, who have these parasites that give him powers. And he runs over to one of the guys after hitting him and rips the parasite off his face. It reminds me very much of what happens to poor Gorilla Grodd in this. He just rips that straight off his face. It peels the skin off along with it. It's pretty gruesome. We have this cadre of villains that the Kronos twins have got that are kind of helping them. Gorilla Grodd, Solomon Grundy, and the Chemo.
Yes.
So
I wouldn't think would interface with Starro the same way, but there's a starfish works on the portion of his containment unit that approximates a face.
Chemo's containment suit gets ruptured. They're like, you need to leave the Earth. He's like, okay, I'm gone. And he just flies off and out into outer space. So, all right, yeah, first issue's fun. They got this pit of Starros. These poor babies. Like, they have the babies. They bring the babies to the Starro pit. Booster's sitting there watching them. One person's picking up a baby. It's got a little Starro on his face. There's another one that doesn't have one back there. But there's just people lined up with these babies getting ready to put them in the Starro pit. It's disturbing. So, all right, so that was kind of my notes on issue 13. Going into issue 14, the best bit in this is the freeze gun. Magic hand. Oh, it's so good. It's probably like 4 panels where Booster's hand just reaches out from this portal as Mr. Freeze has Batman dead to rights with this freeze gun. Booster grabs the freeze gun and Mr. Freeze is looking there absolutely befuddled. He can't understand what just happened. The only words he can utter is like, magic hand? And then Batman comes in and swoops in and punches him in the face. After he uses it, he immediately comes back and puts it back into his hand. Thank you, Magic Hand. And then, sure enough, Batman still punches Mr. Freeze in the face. It's a great bit. I mean, that's probably one of my favorite parts. Watching him use the freeze gun, there's one spot in here which has got to be a reference. This is a Batman and Robin where Mr. Freeze was it a different one?
Batman and Robin.
Batman and Robin. I'm talking about the movies. He's got the freeze gun in his hand. He freezes the Starro off of Lady Kronos' face. So she gets freed, and that's when she decides to try and help Booster out. As he's hitting her with the freeze gun, I can think of so many bad cliches to use here. And I was like, Yeah, that's a nod to the movie for sure. So anyway, that was pretty fun. Having a good time here. Watching Booster try to take care of business against Starro. He's got to go back and try and stop this evil alien. When he hits the Hall of Justice and gets in there and he sees Batman, who's been dead, just kind of leaning up. It's pretty rough. But yeah, we have Lady Kronos who helps him defeat Starro. And she says, yeah, you owe me one. I can't believe that they do not pick up. Of course, like you said, Rick Remender's gone. So they're just not going to use. Right.
I mean, Gail Simone introduced her, but I guess Remender did a lot with her. Yeah, I mean, I don't know they necessarily had a falling out with DC. He just didn't do a lot with DC.
What a crazy 2-page spread we have here. Booster looking on with Lady Kronos on, what do they fly on? Some kind of big watch or something?
Yeah, it's some kind of clock thing that she and Kronos use to fly around.
Yeah, they're just looking at this 2-page spread of the Justice League and every superhero fighting every superhero. They're all fighting each other and they all have Starros on their face. Pretty cool. At least a cool shot, in my opinion.
You've got Hawkman basically squeezing the Atom to death.
Yeah.
Who also has a teeny tiny Starro on his face.
You've got, of course, Captain Marvel and Superman duking it out.
Yeah. Firestorm taking on Black Adam.
What appears to be Bane?
Yeah, Bane's got a water tower.
Water tower?
And let's see, Animal Man and Green Arrow. I guess what they said was Starro just had the superhumans destroy each other. So yeah, you got Animal Man and Green Arrow trying to take out Bane. Wonder Woman fighting Stargirl. Oh, and she's got Stargirl's control rod.
Oh, she does?
Yeah, hitting her with her own weapon. Firestorm and Black Adam. Steel and Adam Strange. And then you got Green Lantern taking on the Flash and Blue Beetle.
Oh yeah, that's Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle there, and that is the Flash over there. Yeah, that's a cool looking scene right there. I don't have many other notes here. They give the gun back. Rip Hunter finally gets the Starro thing off of his face, the Starro spore, and I mean, this is a pretty big cliffhanger, sort of. Let's say cliffhanger, but I mean, it definitely sets things up for the future. That because at the end, Rip's like, oh man, you don't know what you've just unleashed. You've given the Kronos twins their heart's desire. What did he give them?
I don't really know. Maybe the location of his time lab.
Okay.
That might have been it. He says this sets it all in motion, all of it. But fortunately, Barry Allen and Zoom screwed up the timeline way worse, and New 52.
Yeah. New 52. All right. What's your thoughts, man?
One sequence we didn't talk about that I thought was pretty cool is the opening when Booster is in the pit of Starros, and you can see them breaking through his goggles, trying to attach to his face.
Yeah, his force field is not working, by the way. Yeah. So, that's a big deal.
But he rewired and rerouted the gauntlet energy cells to his force field.
And then completely forgot about it 2 panels later. When he tried to shoot one of them with, I forgot I did that.
That was pretty cool. Let the people who think Booster is a loser look at that sequence. It's high stakes, time travel insanity. And maybe a little hard to follow parts of it, but overall still fun. A little darker, especially with that meditation on you can't save everybody. But that's what the whole first storyline with Ted was about. So I mean, good balance and action and fun. Even though this doesn't have the same creative team. At least 11 and 12 had Jurgens, who's been there a lot of time. But still I think fit with the tone pretty well. And just another crazy romp through DC history.
Patrick Olaf. So do you recognize his pencils or his art at all?
Recognize the name.
Yeah, same here. That's kind of where I was like, okay, I recognize the name. I'm going to throw some titles out here to you. Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Looks like he started out in 1990. Most of his work throughout the 90s was with Marvel. As we get towards the end, Unlimited Access 1, 2, 3, and 4. He was penciler on that, but most of his work
was the third, I think.
Yeah, this was late 97 when that was going on. He started in the early 90s, Mighty Thor number 437. He had a tiny run on Thor. Nomad, if you read any Nomad, he did issues 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Sensational She-Hulk number 54, 55, 56, 57. And Warlock and the Infinity Watch issues 29 through almost 40. Untold Tales of Spider-Man, Spider-Girl, If you read any Spider-Girl, he was the penciler on that. And it looks like he did a lot of all the way to 56. He did 1 through 56. So anyway.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of some work history for Pat Olaf. I had a good time, man. This was a good couple stories. I do like what you said about how you have a different creative team these last 2 issues. And you kind of do worry about how's it going to feel? Is it going to feel much different from what we've had before? I'd say that a lot of what you get here this seems more Booster focused than Booster and Michelle doing a lot of things in the last 2 compared to the one that you had where Booster and Michelle were running around trying to correct what was going on. But it doesn't mean she wasn't here. It just felt like it was more Booster focused and still a good time. Any other thoughts before we get into plugs?
No, I'm good. It was fun to revisit.
All right. Sounds good. Let's talk about some plugs here, Evan Bevins. What do you got going on over there at Asterisk 51 and any other projects you got going on?
Well, asterisk51.blogspot.com. That's my blog site where I'm working my way through the second half of the amalgam issues where Marvel and DC mixed and matched their characters. You can also occasionally find me looking at free comic book day issues. Were they worth the money? Were they effective at getting you to try to pick up any more of the other issues? Check out hashtag Free Comic Friday on the site formerly known as Twitter. You can also look up hashtag Dollar Tree Cinema for various movies, some you've heard of, some you haven't, that you can find at Dollar Tree, could find at Dollar Tree. They seem to be getting out of the physical media game too. You'd think if other people were, they would just be getting more. But
right.
Anyway, don't worry. It's not hoarding if I write about it, but I've got a lot of movies to keep that going. Of course, you and I get together once a month to talk about Marvel Snap.
That's right.
The mobile game. And I feel like in our latest episode, I at least vastly undersold Symbiote Spider-Man's Activate ability.
Oh, so you've been using it quite a bit here lately, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then I pop up occasionally elsewhere on the interwebs. Billy D over at Magazines and Monsters is kind enough to have me on to talk about Weird Comics with Bob Haney or the occasional early Dennis Hopper film that's public domain on YouTube. So check that out, too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're most likely listening to this, and I really hope there's not as many ads as there has been lately on the Source Material Comics podcast feed. The ads are getting atrocious. Now, I'm not in control of them, but I listened to one of Mark's recent ones, hour-and-a-half podcast, maybe not even that. An ad every 10 minutes.
Wow.
I think I was listening to our recent episode of Unspoken Issues that just dropped today on the Power of Shazam. Same thing.
I was listening to our Snap material, and I didn't notice anything except the beginning and the end.
The beginning and the end, and I think that if it's 20 minutes or less, they don't throw an ad on it. But if you hit the half-hour mark, they're going to divide it up and usually throw one in every 10 minutes. So if you're listening to this right now, most likely you were listening to it on the Source Material Comics feed, and we appreciate it. You just heard us discuss volume 2.5 of Booster Gold. We'll be coming back at you. I mean, I still plan on doing this. I mean, I'm still having a good time here, Evan. We'll come back with a further volume of Booster Gold, so look out for that in the future. And, of course, we got the 90s-centric podcast on here, Unspoken Issues. That's an affiliation with the Unspoken Decade, that 90s comic website and a great Facebook page. We just aired our discussion on the Power of Shazam, Jerry Ordway's Power of Shazam. Yeah. If you want to check that out, we had a great discussion. It was me, Dean, and Derry getting together. I learned a good bit about Captain Marvel. It was fun. I think that's it. Evan already talked about Snap material, and I don't believe there's anything else to plug, so we're going to go ahead and get on out of here. That is Evan Bevins. I'm Jesse Starcher. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Well, I hopped into my time machine, thought I'd fix a little glitch, but now I'm stuck in medieval France. Man, life's a real stitch. I'm Booster Gold, hero untold, but today is getting pretty old. My mentor's got a starfish face, that's something you can't erase. Oh, I'm tangled up in time, chasing starfish crime. Got a robot named Skeets, avoiding defeat repeats. If I could just rewind, I'd leave this mess behind. Starro's got us in a bind, mind controlling ain't so kind. He thought the star on Rip Hunter's head, man, I sure hope that he's not dead. Oh, I'm tangled up in time, chasing starfish crime. My sister's here tonight in this 14th century drag. If I could just rewind, I'd leave this mess behind. Jumped to Gotham on a whim, stole a gun from Mr. Freeze. Batman gave me such a glare, magic hands got what it needs. Back to the future, things are dire. Starro setting the world on fire. This chick Jaya says I owe her one when this saga's all said and done. Oh, I'm tangled up in time, chasing starfish should be a crime. The Corona's twins are here, someone go get me a beer. If I could just rewind, I'd leave this mess behind. I fell into a pit of spores, now I'm seeing stars galore. Is this the end of your pal? Got it handled, bro, I'll get out. Oh, I'm tangled up in time, but at least I made it rhyme. The world's still spinning around, finally beat that Starro clown. If I could just rewind, I'd press pause and unwind. So if you find a starfish creep controlling minds and you're losing sleep, you need someone to lend a hand, call the booster, 'cause I'm your man.